All right, awesome. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Anna. I lead the global design team here at Lab 49, and I also have Jonny Grass here with me. He is our UX scorecard expert and a senior UX designer on our team. He's a design lead with us, and he comes from a research background. So in this session, we'll be sharing our UX scorecard process and how we use this process to evaluate products and create recommendations for the improvement of products for our clients. The session should run about 30 minutes, give or take about 5 minutes or so, and we'll use that time to share a few things. We'll start with some UX themes that we're seeing across the industry. We'll share an explanation of what the UX scorecard is and why it works. And we'll also share an example case study that illustrates how this work of the UX scorecard gets done and the value of the outputs created during the UX scorecard process. So I hope that you'll step away with some ideas about how you can use the concepts in our UX scorecard to evaluate and improve the products that you work on. Sweet. All right, so I'm going to jump right into some of the themes that we're seeing in the industry. So we tend to see basically like two common things. Many of the business and technology leaders that we're working with face these two common challenges. So the first one is prevalent use of misaligned off-the-shelf solutions. And then the second challenge is outdated legacy products. So when it comes to the first one, off-the-shelf tools, the issue tends to be that they're typically one size fits all, and they don't bend to organizational needs. So you can think about Salesforce as an example of this type. These tools tend to look like shortcuts at first when you first encounter them, but they also tend to be very expensive, and they often fail to align with the existing business processes, which forces users to adapt to the product instead of the product adapting and serving the users. And then with the second theme that we see with prevalence of legacy products, legacy products pose an issue because they often lack user-centered design entirely, which results in a need for extensive training, which can be very time-consuming and tends to lead to like frequent complaints from users as the UX continues to degrade over time. So both of these themes that we're seeing, they both pose pretty significant monetary and regulatory risks. And we actually very frequently hear about the blunders caused by these products in the news. A couple examples just to call out are, first off, back in August 2020, you may have heard about Citibank. They made a major error when processing a loan payment for Revlon, which resulted in the accidental transfer of about $900 million to Revlon's lenders. That mistake was pretty thoroughly documented and unfortunately was very clearly due to bad UX on a legacy product. And it's not a one-off thing. Like as recently as May of this year, a similar issue, but with different players, occurred where $500 million was accidentally sent instead of withdrawn. So these are the kind of things that as a UX designer, these keep me up at night. But what we tend to see with clients is that these like very high risk situations on hard to fix products tend to get lost in the bustle of planning each year because change on a working product is hard to justify. And there's often a lack of qualitative and quantitative data to support that change. So this is exactly what our design team developed the UX scorecard for, is to help provide a evaluation criteria and a clear process for gathering data to help our clients solve these types of problems. So to share more on the details of how we do that, Jonny, I'll hand it over to you.
Cool, thanks, Anna. So yeah, to speak to what Anna was saying. A lot of the time, we see situations where clients have a product, maybe in an example, it's a legacy product that's been around for a while. They know there are some issues with it, and it's unclear if it's something that they could solve with maybe smaller, more tactical fixes, or if there needs to be a larger redesign and rebuild effort. And sometimes you need to use one to get to the other because it's just difficult, obviously, to invest in and build momentum for a much larger project. And so what the scorecard does here is we come in and we have an opportunity to look at a product with known issues, but to really define the problem and try to get you to a place where you have different paths forward and recommendation in a very short period of time, a matter of a few weeks. So you see right here on the right, I'll dive into this in more detail. I know it's really small, but where we're trying to get you to at the end of this, 4 to 6 week process is having 2 to 3 paths forward and clear pros and cons for each, different levels of investment and levels of transformation or business impact, and then giving you a recommendation of which one we think will be the best. So we sort of structure this in terms of having a formula where we come in and we try to gather inputs about the business context in which the product is being used, user pain points, and then also we do our own usability audit on the on-screen workflows as well. And we're using, common industry practices like heuristic evaluations and workflow evaluations. So we're not reinventing the wheel, but we're sort of combining them in this unique way that we found is really effective. So I wanted to share a few of the kind of guiding principles about this that I think makes it kind of successful. So the first one, very successful. The first one is just that it's fast and efficient. So again, we're trying to get you from sort of loosely defined problem to a decision point where you have different viable options within a matter of weeks to 4 to 6 weeks, so around a month. And part of the way that we're able to do this is by, first of all, having deep domain knowledge. So often we can come in and have very little ramp up time because we know your domain, we know the users. We often will come in and we'll see, the product that we're auditing. We're familiar with this type of product, these types of workflows, and so we're able to hit the ground running pretty quickly. We also have easily replicable processes. So I'll show you in a moment, but we have user interview guides, we have survey templates that get at sort of the larger, the higher level research questions. They gather us those inputs that we need to give you the recommendations. And so again, we can come in and hit the ground running really quickly and get to that recommendation point and decision point within a pretty short period of time. Another thing that I think is a strength of this is that it's very adaptable, flexible, and it's business focused. And so we're really cognizant of the fact that this is not an academic exercise. I think that sometimes where something like a heuristic evaluation can fall down a little bit in its application is that it's kind of measuring your product versus an ideal product or the best UX in the world. So often you can come out of a heuristic evaluation with a laundry list of problems that's kind of just more, it'll cause you to freeze more than be able to take action. And so we're really cognizant of trying to put the focus on where there's the largest area of business impact and evaluating just the pieces that will be driving workflows. So the second bullet point about workflow is, I think, a big thing as well. We do a heuristic evaluation, but we really focus early on in this process in defining what are the core workflows that users are doing with this product and where they fit into the larger set of user goals and the larger journeys of what they're doing. And then as we're going through and we're evaluating the problems, we're really putting the focus on anything that would block completing that workflow or block moving forward and trying to identify areas of opportunity for maybe reconfiguring the workflow so that it's much more streamlined or requires less duplication or automation or any of this type of thing. So we can kind of reimagine this in a better way. And the last thing, the last guiding principle is a simple output. So you'll see, but and at the end of this process, give you a single page that frames the problem at a high level, sort of the core problems. And we do link out to, lots of evidence that backs what we found, but we try to give you a single page where you can see in one place the problem and our recommendations and different paths forward. So this is a document that you could easily pull up and refer back to. You could circulate in your organization so that you don't have to sort of wade through and decode things and get overwhelmed by, a huge backlog. We do have the documentation, but we try to make it easily digestible. Before I go into the details of each of the steps, I just want to give you sort of an overview. So again, 4 to 6 weeks. The beginning of this, we start with understanding the business context. So we work with stakeholders to understand who users are, what the larger journeys are that users are doing, and where this product fits in. We map out the workflows kind of step by step. Then in the second part here, we do user research. One thing that I want to point out is that I do think that it's kind of a strength of this offering that we really do think of it as a formula where we're trying to gather inputs. And so we're trying to meet you where you're at. So for instance, if there have been situations where we go into a client and they know that this product has issues, so they've been gathering feedback from users. So we go in and they have a spreadsheet with like a bunch of feedback from users about the known problems. And this is really great. So we can then go in and on day one, we can start, synthesizing the research that they've already gathered. We're not going to approach this and say, well, every time we go through and we do 20 user interviews and we're the experts, so like we're going to redo the work or anything. We're really trying to, go from start to finish as much as we, as quickly as we can. And so we'll take what you have to start out with, and then of course, if there are gaps in our knowledge, we'll go ahead and do follow-up research. But this can really accelerate the timeline, and so it's one of the reasons why we sort of have this flexible timeline. And then after we do the user research, we move into this phase where we do a workflow evaluation. So that's when we will have someone walk us through the actual workflows on screen. So where the user is clicking to achieve the happy path of their workflow. And we will do a heuristic evaluation of that. And I'll give you more details on that in a second. And then finally, at the end, we'll present multiple paths forward to optimize for different strategies, and we'll give you a recommendation and reasons why. So sharing a little bit about the business context that we're trying to gather. This on the right is showing just some of the templates that I was talking to. So we come in, we have a set of high-level research questions that we're trying to answer. Some of those you can see listed on the left-hand side. So really just who users are, how this fits into the context of what they're doing. A couple things that I want to call out here that I think are interesting, because maybe you wouldn't think that we'd be asking these questions, but one of the things we try to learn is, how did this product come to be? One scenario that maybe resonates with you is that we see pretty regularly is maybe a product starts out as there's a stakeholder or a team who has access to a development team. And so they start out building, wouldn't it be great if I could have a report that does this? And then they start layering in features, and it sort of evolves into a product that maybe never had a cohesive product strategy, maybe never had design involved. And so learning about this history of the product is really, really valuable in terms of understanding where some of the pain points lie and how we can create solutions for it. Another thing that's interesting that we encounter a lot is just who else beyond the intended audience is using it. So in that scenario, we'll often see, one team's using this product to do something and another team has a similar and analogous task. And so they start using this product, and then maybe they more users get onboarded, and so over time the product becomes a little bit less fit for purpose. And so this can sort of explain a little bit of some of the challenges that we see. So after we do, and I'll just share, this is showing here how we map out the workflow step by step, and that sort of feeds into the user research and the evaluation piece. So after we've defined the core workflows that we're looking to evaluate, we will do user research. And one of the things, we again use common methods. So we use interviews, we can use surveys as well. One of the things that user research is really, really helpful for in this process is identifying the pain points, of course, and then also situating the workflows that we're evaluating within the larger set of user goals and the larger journeys that people are doing. So often we'll find that this evaluation starts with a small subset of workflows. And then in talking to users, we realize that maybe improving these workflows will not solve their larger problems because they're still needing to go to 5 other systems to replicate their work, or they're pulling data from different places that it's just not integrated in a way that makes sense. And so solving incrementally their interactions with a specific product is not necessarily going to solve the larger workflow. So that's something that often comes out of this that's really, really valuable. And then lastly, the evaluation method. So again, in the beginning of this, we start out by working with stakeholders to define the core workflows that are involved in using this product, and specifically looking at the workflows that have high business impact. And we do apply heuristics. So we click through the workflow, either with an SME walking us through, or if we can have access to the product in a non-prod environment, we can click through the workflow in the happy path, and then identify any usability issues. So we do use, industry standard heuristics, the Jacob Nielsen 10 that most UX designers know, maybe many people who aren't UX designers are familiar with. But we also use our own heuristics that we've defined based on our experience, working with so many clients that really emphasize common workflows that we see in the finance industry, a lot of multi-team collaboration, task management, and visibility into statuses. And so we really have a lot to draw on in terms of identifying challenges and then also recognizing opportunities. So if we have heuristics that define that addressing a problem needs to have easy contextual communication around it, and we don't see that, then that can give us an idea of where to suggest improvements. And then the other piece that I want to point out here is just this sort of guide of how to apply our heuristics. So again, we're putting the focus on workflow completion. And so we make a point of not just blowing up the page with all the problems that we see and comparing this product to an idealized UX of a product, but actually putting the emphasis on any barriers to completion of any step or any friction that would slow down or cause problems for someone completing their workflow. Because at the end of the day, the goal here is just to get work done. So I wanted to wrap up with kind of a brief discussion of an example to bring this to light. So this case study, it was with a brokerage that had a reconciliation tool. So basically reconciling transactions across multiple accounts. So making sure that if there was a transaction out of one account, there's a corresponding transaction on the other side. So they would always be looking up transactions, doing a little bit of investigation of what happened with that transaction, trying to find a matching transaction to make sure that you had both sides of that, and then sometimes creating a new transaction to offset a break, which would be just a transaction that doesn't have a matching other side. So the reason that they called us in was that they had a very old legacy product. It was very, very inefficient. It required a lot of manual work with a lot of duplicative data entry. And then another challenge that caused a lot of business problems was just that it was really challenging to train people on this. So as Anna said, a huge investment in training people to use an overly complex, not very usable product. And so they had a lot of deep expertise of how to do the workarounds to use the product, concentrated in a few people who are kind of stuck in their roles. And then they also had struggles, onboarding newer employees who were expecting a much better user experience and didn't want to deal with the ramp up that it would take to understand how to use this new product or this old product. So we went through our process with this, and then here's a scorecard example that came out of it. So in looking through this product, we're really focused on the workflows of finding, searching for transactions, identifying looking at the history of the transaction and researching it to identify where the problem lies, and then creating a corresponding transaction to offset it. And what we found in discussing this with users and having them walk us through their workflow and share screens, et cetera, was that there was actually all these other problems in their larger journey, both before and after these core workflows that we were targeting. So one example of this is users would come in the beginning of their day, and they would actually have emails from 3 different teams with Excel spreadsheets of just line items of transactions. It might have been problems that they needed to research, or there were things they needed to research that may or may not be problems. So they'd spend a couple hours actually combining these spreadsheets into one, and then going through and cleaning up transactions. For instance, if something was before the settlement date, it shouldn't be on this list, so they're going to investigate it in a couple days. Then they'd have to go through and manually delete this. So they'd actually spend a couple hours just getting their heads around what they have to tackle this morning. Then the actual workflows that they did were challenging. There were lots of usability issues. And then also in terms of as they were processing these tasks, as they were doing the research, going through to try to investigate where the break was that they needed to resolve, they were having a lot of challenges because they'd have to go to multiple systems, run multiple searches, look for one field on a particular screen, then go back through and manually look for a similar field on another screen. So there was no easy comparison. There was no integrated way to look at some of these, to look at a transaction and sort of piece together the story. So in terms of what we presented them with, we listed out some of the core problems here that I just mentioned to you. And we had this appendix that links out. So again, you can go see the evidence with the annotated challenges everywhere that we found them. And then we presented them with 3 paths forward. So the first one was just improving the original workflows that we were looking at. So just finding a break, resolving it. And this was kind of like an incremental solution. So for this, we provided examples of the challenges. We also provided some best practices of how you would improve this. So just kind of standard UX best practices so that you can make small iterative changes. Another thing, though, that we really wanted to draw attention to was that lack of ability to understand what your list of tasks are. And then alongside that, if you don't have a list of tasks that you're working, then it makes things like reporting a lot harder. You can't see which tasks are getting done, how progress is being made. Managers couldn't see, if I have a task or a break that's being worked, who owns this and where is it in the process, especially if there were multiple teams that were handing this off to do different steps of it. They couldn't have any visibility into that. So we proposed another option would be to focus on the task management piece, just a task queue with visibility and statuses. And this would be a bigger improvement and would have larger business impacts. And then the last solution that we proposed was this end-to-end task processing platform that would have integrated data so someone could do all of their research in one screen. So this is a concept design that we provided for that. So you can see, a user comes in and rather than having to construct their day's batch of work in the beginning, they could see their task list, they could see KPIs about how things are going, and this would steer their attention towards important tasks that need to be prioritized. They could open up a task, and then they'd have a processing screen where they could take steps. They could enter in the offsetting transaction they need, or mark something as not a break or not needing attention. And they would have all of their information here on the right side so that they could be making the necessary decisions rather than going to many different systems. And then after they take action to resolve the problem, they would have clear confirmation of the status of something. It would be updated in the task list. And so everything would be seamless and up to date and very smooth. So on the back of that, they ended up electing for the third option. And so it became part of a multi-year project that we worked with them on. And one of the things that I think was really a selling point in this was that as we were talking to people in the process, we realized that there were many teams actually that were doing some version of reconciliation. And so there were many teams that were doing essentially the same thing, but they had been in their little silos. And so this gave us the opportunity, embarking on this bigger project gave us the opportunity to talk to each team, account for those commonalities, and have be solving for a much wider amount of problems and a much greater amount of users and business workflows with just a single system. So this was sort of a great outcome to come out of this.
Thanks, Jonny. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I hope this gave you some more information about our UX scorecard and what some applications of it are. We love to talk about this stuff, so feel free to reach out to either of us directly or find us on LinkedIn. We're around. So I really appreciate you taking the time. And thanks, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of your day.